I'm joined now to talk about the ACT, and I know that I took it years ago. I haven't taken an ACT in a very long time, but I know all of those tests is definitely something special. You really do have to pay attention to it and study for it now. But now I'm with Mr. David. I don't want to say your last name and mess it up. How do you pronounce it?
Blobaum.
Okay, Blobaum. All right.
Don't even try it. It's all good.
I didn't want to mess it up. I'm sorry.
You're good. You're good.
Kind of just walk me through all of the changes that students and parents should expect and prepare for with the years of the ACT. It's changed so much since I was in high school.
Yes, both the SAT and ACT have changed multiple times now. So the ACT actually, while the SAT has changed multiple times, the ACT is actually dramatically changing for the first time in over 20 years. So the ACT has two formats. There's a digital format you take on a computer. There's a paper format you take on paper. The new ACT is rolling out at different times on the different formats. So this coming April, if you're taking the digital ACT, you'll take that new ACT test. If you're taking the paper, you'll keep taking the same current ACT until September. And the paper also changes to the new format. And students should appreciate all of the changes. So they're going to get more time per question. And one of the four sections, the science section, is becoming optional. So not all students will have to take it.
That's actually really interesting to me because, I mean, science was my favorite part of the SAT and the ACT as well, just kind of mixing it up. Obviously, journalist here, loved the writing portion, but science was always, I guess I would say it evolved so much from, my sister used to give me her ACT study book. My mom used to make me put all of my homework on the table, and then she'd tell me to go take a practice test in the dining room. And I hated it. I hated those practice tests. But it has kind of evolved a little bit with that digital format. What do students need to know the most about that?
So about the digital format, I would actually say don't take the digital format. So the interface of that digital ACT is just not as good. So I would definitely advise stick with the paper ACT for now. Now, the SAT went all digital. There's no paper option for the SAT. That changed last year. And they have a really good format for that digital exam, which is good because there's only the digital option. For the SAT digital test, though, students should know that there's an on-screen Desmos calculator. So you used to have to bring a calculator, and there was some inequality between, if you had a really fancy calculator or not. Now all students have access to an incredibly powerful on-screen calculator. Downside, though, is it's quite complex. Good thing is everyone has access to it. So really, all students need to put, I would say, at least 2 hours into learning how to use that on-screen Desmos calculator. That's the biggest advantage that you can get on that SAT math section.
So your answer right now would be no, if the student should or should not take the ACT. And I know you kind of went a little bit into an explanation, but how could you, explain it to viewers that don't really understand, why you're saying no?
Good question. So I would say don't take the digital ACT just yet. Paper ACT is great, though. I mean, if anything, it's a more reliable exam, in my opinion, than the current SAT. So for viewers, I would say choose between the paper ACT and the SAT. Forget about the digital ACT. Don't even take the digital ACT. Take the paper ACT. And now, to figure out whether the SAT or the ACT is the better test for a student, they really need to do, as your mom had you do, take a practice exam of both. So is it fun? No. But the ACT gives you less time per question, but it's more straightforward. The SAT gives you more time per question, but it's a lot more tricky. So you don't really know in advance which one you're going to do better on. So you really need to take a practice test of both, use an official concordance table to compare your scores, see which one fits you best, and then prep for that test. So both tests are evaluating students on the fundamentals of grammar, rhetorical skills, mathematics, reading. So these are skills that all students can and probably should learn before they go off to college. So all students can improve on those skills, but you want to figure out which test fits you best and then target your time and effort in that direction.
So, what about the SAT? I know it changed last year, and the test is still kind of finding its footing. So what about the SAT? Does that have any changes that are going to come with it as well?
Yes, so that had a lot of changes. So one, it went to digital, which it had always been paper for the 100 years that it had been offered prior to that. So it became digital. There's now that, as we mentioned, that on-screen Desmos calculator, but it's also now adaptive for the first time ever. And so what that means is that, so there's 4 sections. The first section is a verbal section. It has hard, medium, and easy questions on it. Depending on how a student does, if they do well, the next verbal section will just be hard and medium questions. If they don't do as well, they're just going to get medium and easy questions. And then it'll repeat. Math, the first math section has hard, medium, easy. And then again, you do well, hard, medium, not as well, medium, easy. So you could get very different tests depending on how you do. If you get slotted into the easy verbal and easy math, your score's basically capped at a 1200. So you really need to do well enough on that first section to get the next hard module. That's when you can really score higher than a 1200 on the SAT. It's out of 1600 now.
So, kind of grasping the point of it going to digital. For me, whenever I was in college, I was always a better test taker when I was doing it on paper than I was doing online test. And I think most people kind of moved to that digital testing side whenever COVID hit. Do you think that's kind of like how the SAT and the ACT are trying to, I guess, maneuver over to, is that digital side of test portions? Kind of how college tests are, or college classes, that sort of thing.
It's a great question. I think it's more about test security and cost. So when you have a lot of paper exams floating around before a test is given, there's a lot more chances that someone's gonna, distribute or steal one of those paper tests and leak it online, which has happened. South Korea has had its entire country's test scores canceled on some days. So from a test security perspective, when it's digital, no one can see that digital exam in advance. So it's more secure to be digital. But 2, when you're not shipping out test booklets, printing them, getting them shipped back, it's a lot less expensive per student. So it's really for the benefit of the test makers that it went digital. Now, I will say that on-screen Desmos calculator is just mind-blowingly good on the digital SAT exam. So at least that helps to balance it out. Yes, it's digital, which is typically less ideal from a testing perspective, as you mentioned, but then at least everybody has access to a very powerful calculator.
It definitely seems like there might be some pluses and some minuses here. I mean, if you're a test taker on paper like me, and kind of how I study, it might be difficult for you to move over to that digital side. I mean, do you think that that's kind of a plus and a minus here for that?
Absolutely. Yes. So yes, you get that on-screen calculator, but then if you're doing a geometry question and you see a figure on the screen, well, then you have to redraw that figure on your paper before you can really start solving it. Students hate writing things down. So the biggest tip for geometry is just redraw that figure that you saw on the screen, redraw it on your paper. That's literally the best trick that students can have for geometry. It would blow your mind how the majority of students do not just redraw the figure. So yes, there's some downsides to it that just you don't have the figure to draw on. It's harder to take digital exams in general. So to your point, yes, pros and cons. I will say the SAT did a fantastic job of optimizing their tests for a digital format. So for instance, on the ACT, you'll have very long, and a lot of other exams, you'll have very long reading passages, and then a question, and then multiple questions on them. So you're like scrolling up and down on that reading passage. It's not a good testing experience. The SAT, they've cut all of their reading passages down dramatically so you can see the whole passage on one side, and there's just one question per passage. So it doesn't make it easier that the passages are shorter. If anything, it's harder questions on those short passages. But they did a very good job of designing it to be a digital test.
So, with all these changes, obviously, there's pluses, there's minuses. I think we kind of covered the pluses and minuses. I feel like there's a lot of unknown here. You know, we're in kind of a gray area where we don't really know yet what it's going to look like. Am I right on with that?
You are right on that. So on the SAT side, historically, it has taken them, and I've seen the SAT change now 3 times in the last 15 years since I've been preparing students for the test. And their sort of like settling period takes about 2 years before they get a consistent test that's, just as accurately graded as before, in my opinion. So we still have a year left until the SAT becomes more predictable, more reliable. And the ACT is changing this year, and that's not ideal. So unfortunately, this next set of students, they're going to have a relatively new SAT that just changed a year ago, and they're going to have a brand new ACT that is changing this year. Not ideal, but the most important thing to keep in mind is the SAT and the ACT, they're at top colleges. The SAT and ACT are 3.9 times more predictive than a student's high school grades. Which, when you think about it, how is it possible that a 2 or 3 hour exam is dramatically more predictive of success in college than almost 4 years of grades in high school? That almost doesn't make sense. The reason why that's the case is the SAT are designed not to measure how much have you learned in high school, like grades are. It's have you mastered the fundamental knowledge and skills that are proven to predict success in college. And so for all students, changes or not changes, the tests are still testing you on the fundamental knowledge and skill that you need for college. So if you have a lower score, not only do you want to get that score up so you can get into a better college, get more merit aid, get more scholarships, but you really want to get that score up because you want to get better at that knowledge and skill that's proven to help predict success in college.
Yeah, it definitely seems like there are a few changes. Do you have any, like last minute advice for those moms or anyone that might want to, kind of prepare themselves for this new change for the ACT, SAT, that sort of thing?
Yes. So there's no secret information that is tested on the SAT and ACT, and we live in a golden age of information. So students can go to Khan Academy and get free SAT prep. They can get inexpensive prep books. They can do an online class, an in-person class. They can do private tutoring. So however your child learns best, there's an avenue to learn and improve your skills. I'm from the National Test Prep Association. Families can head to nationaltestprep.org and find professional tutors in their area.
Yeah, it definitely seems like there's a couple different avenues that you can go down to prepare your kiddo for one of these tests. I mean, I don't have kids in high school, but I'd probably do the same thing that my mom did with me, which was go to the dining room, study, take a practice test, and keep going, make flashcards, that sort of thing. And maybe that might help for the digital side too. I mean, I think it's the same prep that you have taking it on paper than you do taking it on the digital side.
100%. It's still the same knowledge and skills, however the format, whatever the format.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for that update, and we loved having you here on East Texas Now to give us the newest information about the ACT and SAT as well. We really do appreciate you coming on, so thank you so much.
My pleasure.
All right. Have a good day. Bye-bye.